Snowy, snowy day. It's Bill Correll again with my good buddy Lisa Sheehan, and we are lighting the candle, a world that works. We get together periodically and just kind of share conversations and some fellowship and get to talk to each other in terms of theory, but also experiences and the kinds of things that bring empowerment into a conversation and maybe replace a breakdown or some stuckness or something of that nature where we're human beings and we have those things that go on in our lives, and I'm sure you do too. Nobody's exempt from that. Oh, you say a couple hundred times a day? Yeah, well, that happens too, doesn't it? So life is all about choosing the next moment. The one you've got right now is the one you take action in to create the moment that you want, in place of this moment. It could be more of the same. It could be completely different, or it could be something that will require a whole lot of more moments before you get to where you want to be. So that's really what a world that works is all about. The creation first is inside, in your mind, in your soul, in your gut. And then, that comes out of your mouth and your behaviors. And the next thing you know, you're kind of enrolling people around you into how great a world it is, or how great your life is, or how great their life is. And man, that's kind of a neat conversation to embark on. So I want to just take a moment here today, Lisa, with your kind permission. I'd like to talk about a couple of terms. I don't know that we've really gotten too deep into them, but I'd like to talk about consideration and respect, and how these two concepts and processes and domains and all of those other things, opportunities and places to have conversation, how do they relate to a community, and how do they relate to one-on-one respect for each other and consideration? So does that work for you?
Certainement.
Okay, say away. So consideration. Um,
I
you have
looked
a
it up if you
you have
want to.
please do.
Careful thought, typically over a period of time. And the other one is payment or reward, which we're not.
Yeah, that's a kind of a legal term, in consideration of a dollar.
Right.
Yeah.
And respect. Let's see what the. A feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. There's, similar kind of.
Yeah. So the
In
first one, doesn't imply an outcome. It just says what, deep thought usually over time.
over time, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like having a flash in the pan idea or some occurrence, that happens briefly and goes away. It's maybe something that you might dwell on for just a little bit of time. And when we talk about people being considerate, um, or considering things, or that whole approach of being mindful, I want to say that thinking over time is very, very important, to the whole concept of understanding each other and having a conversation that's actually worth having. So in terms of consideration, those would be like how uh, I was raised, that those kinds of things are common, common courtesy, common sense, common ground, common cause, common welfare, all that, commonwealth. And when you think about all of those things, not one of them can be done alone. And so I'm taking the word and I'm kind of generating it. If you're having a thought and you're doing it over time, oftentimes it's going to be, I don't know, maybe noodling on an idea, or possibly noodling on what someone said and interpreting it and letting it kind of, gestate for a little while and come to you in terms of what it actually means, or give you the opportunity in the moment to be curious and ask another question. We love curiosity around here.
Yes, well, because one of the other definitions was thoughtfulness and sensitivity towards others, which is basically what you were just saying. So,
Yeah.
but it could also be, and what came to me, like it's ever changing too. So, while it might be over a period of time, those periods of time constantly are happening. So it could be fleeting too, obviously. And in the moment, you're considering one thing, and then in the next moment, you're considering something else or somebody else.
Yeah. And so the neat part of it is in our last episode, we were talking about, how we're dynamic and the nature of things are that they change. We want to believe that we can hold things equal or hold things in their current form or fashion so that we can deal with whatever else there is to deal with. But at the same time, we always have those conversations about being human beings and not human doings. But even more so, I think we're human changings. That so while you're suggesting that consideration is probably a process that from the beginning to the end, the two are where you are in that thought process is kind of unrecognizable to the other one, right? Where you started and where you finished. So if there's that kind of energy that goes into the thinking about something over time, then it actually is a process of learning, I would say.
I'm thinking that, yeah, that it's obviously an ongoing process to be considering anything, any person. Um, and so mindfulness does come to mind as well. No play on words there. It's just like a curiosity too. So between the two, consideration, I can see my mind is hopping and not.
I think you're being considerate right at the moment. You are definitely
That's true. I'm
considering
considering consideration. Um, because every moment you are considering something. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's an active part of your life, like in every given moment of your day, and probably night too.
yeah.
As your dreams start considering things that you didn't pay attention to consciously during the day.
It's interesting because when you really take a moment to examine a word that has, we've been around the sun a few times, and how many millions of times do you think we've heard or at least thousands of times, the word consideration or considerate or consider or whatever? Songs, REM, the line that says "consider this," from losing my religion. But the point is that sometimes that's a request, like, please, before you speak, will you take a moment and bring your best thought, your best thinking, your best constructive criticism and critical ideas and curiosity to this sentence, and then give me back what you got.
Yeah, it points out a seriousness to the conversation or the action that's taking place, because it has to be. I mean, when you say that, and then the other aspect of it is like the negative, like you're not being considerate, which is probably how more people people hear it often, is you're just not being considerate. So
And oftentimes, there's the Inigo Montoya again. Oftentimes, people don't really understand the word that they are using. And sometimes it's like, we have this really cool thing called a thesaurus. And, I remember when I was the first time I ever heard that, I think I was probably in the third grade, and somebody said, I'm going to go and get the thesaurus. And I was so excited we were going to see a dinosaur,
yeah, I know, right?
But the point is that we have um, all of these words that are either similes or metaphorically linked to each other. And so, for instance, along with consideration, we might have entertainment or entertaining an idea, or, so we have all of this overlap in English. This is why this is such a hard language, for people to learn. And
Hmm.
people say, even though there are innumerable characters in Chinese, the concepts are so simple. It's basically 5 or 6 building blocks. You put them together the way that you want to, and they get recognized and agreed upon. And the next thing you have a word. I don't know how slang works in Chinese. That would be a really interesting one for me. But back to, full circle to consideration and some of the other uh, similar words, or are there any that you would say would be interchangeable?
Well, I liked what you be considerate. You said some of them already. I mean, to be kind, depending on the how you're using the word, to be kind, which is, I mean, some of the most of us think the best way to be in all situations. So you should be kind and considerate in all situations.
Sure.
Thoughtful, um,
How about empathetic?
sympathetic. They may be. Um, I think a lot of times too, it comes down to your intention, which shows up in how you're using the word, and your specific how you're using it in that situation. So it changes by, and if you're using it correctly, like you just said, we're not used to using consideration all the time. And I liked your approach of like, please consider this, or make sure your response is considering the importance of the occasion. Please consider your answer, kind of thing. That was interesting.
Yeah, it's really thoughtful. If you're saying something in a conversation that you want the other person to actually listen to, and really be attentive to what you're saying with all of their being on all 3 levels, both uh, physically and mentally, and then spiritually. Although all three of the ways that we can interact with the world. Um, that's kind of cool, Say, hey, it's like, listen up. Uh, eh, uh, Coaches say stuff like that. Um, I've never heard a coach say, "Consider this." It's
No, I don't think it's, well, it's probably not used as often as, I mean, we know it's there, but
so coming back to what we have just had this whole conversation, and now if we were going to just take a little stab at what consideration might mean in the context of a community, or in the context of a group of people, maybe with disparate ideas and just disparate backgrounds and just disparate training, maybe folks with disparate understandings of what words mean. There are, um, if you stop and think about it, uh, maybe less so now because of all of the social media and internet access, and the breakdown of people's accents. When I was a kid, you could almost immediately identify somebody who was from the south end of Boston, or I mean, seriously, right?
mhm,
And it's almost refreshing to hear Ben Affleck, drift into that Southie accent every once in a while,
right.
or maybe from Georgia. And I don't think I might have been 50 years old and on America Online the first time I ever heard the term hot mess. Come to find out, I guess there's all kinds of different definitions for what that actually is all about too. But again, back in the consideration mode, um, if you charge into a conversation, and you just start running a tape, something you heard somewhere, a thought that you've been having, and then you get these 2 tape recorders that are talking back at each other, and there's really nothing being created except for possibly some frustration, maybe some anger, maybe a sense of not being heard or listened to. So consideration is almost like a bowl that you might make a salad in.